I think it's important to know the truth.
Yeah.
And there were so many people that were impacted. I'm not just saying people, families in this country. And we don't ever want to see something like that ever happen again. So if we don't understand what caused it, and I'm talking about caused the failure, and we don't have a good understanding of that as practicing structural engineers, we really need to rethink, because we don't ever want to see something like that happen again. So if that means there needs to be a code change, if that needs to be some form of provision to prevent it from ever happening again, that's where we ought to be.
Yeah.
That's the primary reason I took this on.
You recall our first conversation? I was in Montreal. I
Yes.
called you, and as soon as I got to the substance of what I wanted to talk about, the phones went out.
Yeah, I remember.
Does that happen to you often?
No, it never does. Hang on
Weird.
a second. Hang on. We're disappeared again. Okay, here we are.
Cool. Okay, you can hear me.
Are we back on?
I'm good. I can hear you fine.
I can hear you too.
Good. Excellent. So, this is Leroy Halsey. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing Leroy Halsey, the illustrious. He has been involved in the study and design of bridges since 1966. Extensive experience in the long-term rich research of high-performance bridges facing various conditions. You, Leroy, also managed and owned several companies, including computer design companies. Dr. Halsey conducted research on many bridges built in Missouri, Alaska, and the Yukon. For example, a cable-stayed bridge at Skagway, Alaska, was performed by Dr. Halsey and his students. This highway bridge is a cable-stayed bridge that is exposed to extreme temperature conditions. Dr. Halsey was part of a governor-appointed team to examine the behavioral response of the $1 Million Bridge. This effort was to provide advice to the governor as to how to move forward with repairing this structure following the 1964 earthquake. Dr. Halsey has also done extensive research in evaluating materials needed to improve the decking and deck wear for the Yukon River Bridge. The bridge is an orthotropic steel deck bridge rather. Dr. Halsey also studied the behavior of precast, pre-stressed concrete bridges that are built throughout the state of Alaska. Dr. Halsey's research team also conducted a study to evaluate and examine the use of structural health monitoring on the Chalitna River Bridge in Alaska. This 1970s bridge is a steel girder bridge. So thank you for your work in forensic engineering, Dr. Halsey. It is so important because we can look at what happened and why it happened so we can better do a job next time to evaluate if there needs to be code changes. This is a public safety issue. So thank you for all the work you have done over the years. It has made structures safer. Thank you, Leroy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I really appreciate everything you've done.
Yeah.
So the project I wanted to speak to you about today was your work in the structural reevaluation of, oh boy, how do I mute this? Oh boy, I hope that doesn't ding. This is my first online interview, my bad. So the project I want to talk to you today about is the structural reevaluation of WTC7. So
okay.
WTC7 being World Trade Center 7. And before we do, since it's the 20th anniversary of those events, 9/11/2001, I would like to just take a moment of silence with you if you're interested.
Just as a point of reference, I also was married on September the 11th, but not on 2001.
Damn. So what year were you married?
1964.
When I'm 64, 1964. Damn. So you've been married quite. Are you still married?
No, my wife passed on in 2014 on September the 28th. But it was kind of interesting that this issue occurred on the same day that I did this. The study that I did was on the same day we got married.
Mhm.
I mean, not looking at the year, but looking at the date, the
Yeah.
month and day. So anyway,
Well, that's kind of symbolic. It's like these two very righteous events for you. I mean, in terms of
yeah,
your addressing of such.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so how would we like to start looking at this whole phenomena that I got involved in?
Yeah, I wanted to. Well, first of all, I wanted to ask you, how is it that your students are in the top 10 in national structural engineering competitions with usually 150 teams competing? Why is it that your students are so immaculate?
Well, that's a really good question. This is about the steel bridge team.
Hmm.
We have there's a there for a while. It started in 1992 by American Institute of Steel Construction. They wanted to promote steel, and so they felt like getting students involved in doing something practical outside the classroom and competing with other schools would probably enhance their learning significantly. They weren't wrong about that point. That was very, very good. Soon after that, AISC turned it over to ASCE, American Civil Engineering, the civil engineering chapters of American Society of Civil Engineering. And so that has nothing to do with what I'm going to answer you about,
No.
but I'm just giving you a little bit of a snapshot of history. So in 1992, I tried to get the students involved in this, what I thought was a really great idea, and I couldn't. But in 1993, I didn't even have to convince them. A student decided he really wanted to do this. So 4 of our students put together a team without a lot of help from any of us, any of the faculty, and very innovative. And we went to regionals that year and won everything. We then went to nationals and won absolutely everything. And so all of a sudden, this little school in Alaska suddenly developed a name for itself fairly quickly.
Mm.
And that gave me motivation to try to get a steel bridge shop, basically a shop that had milling machines, welders, cutters, lathes, metal lathes, everything that they would need to really do a top-notch job. The university contributed some to that, but most of the money that came in to build about a $250,000 shop that became the students' shop was from alumni and people in the area that felt like this would really enhance education. So with that kind of support and knowing that the whole town, the university, the profession was behind them, they then decided that I didn't have to convince them. They became very, very in love with this because they step out of the classroom, put it together a design, and then see how well they could do it. Here's the neat thing. I would not let them put together a design and send it off to a fabrication company like a lot of the schools did. I said, you will fabricate it yourself. You will make it. You will compete with it. You will do all the things that you would ask somebody else to do. And the students learned a great deal through that process. And they developed pride in their work. They developed a very, very good way to compare the education they're getting in a remote area with the top schools in the nation. And so in 1993, like I said, we won the nationals. In 1994, we came in 4th place. In 1995, I think we skipped that year. In 1996, we tied for nationals again. And then, and we've almost always been in the top 10. But the students take pride in what they do. And through that pride and through that wondering how to do it better than anybody else, it basically, I don't have to do much of anything to convince them this is the way to have passion about what you learn. So anyway, that's where we've been, still are. Now we've got a concrete canoe team as well. although I'm not there any longer, and they're
Concrete
doing well.
canoe?
Concrete canoe.
Can you explain that?
Well, it's a canoe made out of concrete, and it's lightweight, and we're using new fibers and new technology to get it very thin, very lightweight, and you can actually really race with it. So the students go to these different places and race with these things, and again, to try to establish who they are and winners of the product they just created. So in some ways, imagine there are rules that you got to follow, but in some ways, how innovative can you become around a rule? That's what the students are doing. They're looking at ways to do it better than someone else and come up with a better idea.
Hmm.
So that's almost an entrepreneurship approach to taking an something that we're doing and do it better than the other person.
That's fantastic.
And this is all outside the classroom. The classroom gives you the tools, the education, the knowledge, to learn how to do some of this stuff. But the hands-on, making it work, that's a whole different picture.
Yeah.
And so they really, really enjoy that. So
that's incredible. So that's a little bit about your students and how you've inspired them and given them the opportunity to shine.
well, I think the students are everything. So I mean, at the end of the day, if I don't convince the students to be the best at what they're learning to be, then I haven't done my job very well. I feel like when they walk into that classroom, they will come out of that classroom competitive, better than if they want to be the best in the world, they can be.
Incredible.
So
Beautiful. So you were saying in 1993 was the day or the year that you took home all those prizes for, best bridge design, best structural engineering for bridges.
well, yeah, there were several categories like lightweight, fastest bridge you can put together. There's several categories, and also the best looking bridge, and and all those things. And I think there's 4 or 5 categories. I don't remember all of them, but when it all said and done, you add up all the numbers, and the top school becomes the one with the least score. And so, and there's several categories there. You can win pieces. You can win the best looking bridge, but not the #1 bridge. You can be the lightest weight bridge, but not the #1 bridge. I mean, so those are the kind of the categories that we have, and the faster you can put it together faster than the guy down the street, but still not the #1 bridge. When you take all of those things and put them together, and you end up with the lowest score, that's the #1 bridge.
Cool. The only way I can relate to that is we did 24-hour musicals or 24-hour film festivals back in the day. So, given the script and given a cast and given a crew, it's like, what's the best you can come up with in 24 hours,
But similar approach, taking and becoming innovative with what you're looking at, and how you want to make things better than if you've seen before.
Mm-hmm. And in a crunch, you get really creative and start casting your lighting designer as your lead or something like that. Just give it that edge. So that kind of put you on the map, so to speak, and put your students on the map and gave your University of Alaska Fairbanks a lot of attention.
And has continued to do that.
Okay, great. So you're kind of responsible for putting University of Alaska Fairbanks on the map.
Well, I don't like to take responsibility for that, but certainly I'm happy about the fact that we've been successful. We've developed a name for ourselves. We gave our students pride in what they do. It's kind of like if you're a football player and you're on the best team at the university, you have the best university team in the nation. There's a lot of pride to that. I mean, it's the same kind of game, same kind of thought. Do your best at what you do, and try to surpass those that you're competing with. And from that, you're not only becoming more proficient, but you're learning how to do something very, very well.
Beautiful.
So
I love it. So you're still at your school teaching. Are you
no,
there
I'm
now?
retired.
Oh,
I
you
retired.
Okay.
Yeah, I retired on June. The last day was June 30th, 2020. Last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So you retired just recently.
Yeah, just recently.
How's that been?
Oh, it's really good. Actually, I've been busier since I retired than I was before. Not just not research, but lots and lots and lots of engineering stuff. So
Okay.
it's been a lot of fun.
Excellent. So it's
Yeah.
the game isn't over yet.
Hopefully not. Too much passion to let that happen.
Perfect. Beautiful, man. Well, so that was in 1993 that you took home all those prizes with your students. Your students took all those prizes home. You were a catalyst
Right.
in that aspect, but that kind of put you on the map, gave University of Alaska Fairbanks some attention, and gave, I guess, you some attention too, because I'm curious of how you came on the radar of A&E for 9/11 Truth, the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, because they could have chosen any structural engineer in the world, given their resources, to conduct this structural reevaluation of the collapse of World Trade Center 7. But they came to you because I'm assuming you just have this immaculate career and this incredible soul and unbiased perspective, and you're in Alaska, so you're a little bit out of Dodge. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know all the reasons. I know
Okay.
that I think they tried some other faculty and they turned them down. They came to me,
Okay.
a faculty member, not a faculty member, but a gentleman who was in Anchorage, who it was members of the A&E 9/11 Truth, and he was also a graduate mechanical engineer, as well as worked in the hospital. So he somehow he found out about me and he contacted me, and I turned him down. Contacted me again and I turned him down. Contacted me again and I finally said, you know what, I'm in my 70s. If they don't like me and they want to do away with me because I've done something like this, it's no big deal. I'll contribute. So I finally said I'll put in a proposal, and I did, and they accepted it. So that's where we went.
So architects and engineers of 9/11 Truth came to you, and then you came with a proposal to your university?
Through the university, yeah.
Through the
The
university.
university got the grant, and
Okay.
the way the university works is that if you get a research project, you become what's called the principal investigator.
Mm,
The money comes into the university.
mm,
My salary doesn't change. None of
mm,
that kind of stuff changes.
mm,
If any money that I get paid for on a research project would be during the summer
mm.
when I'm not teaching,
Okay.
and so it would pay for that time. And sometimes that happens, and sometimes there's not enough money to go around to even make that happen, but you still do the research and you still get it out the door, because you're in the fun, you're actually in the publication business. So you have to continue to do your work to stay tenured and, to get tenured and do all the kind of things that universities expect. So
Oh, okay. So, to my knowledge, it was 2006. Was that the first time they reached out to you, or was that when you started the research? If you recall.
no, I think they reached out to me a year or two before that, and
Right.
I think it was a couple years before that.
And you turned them down
They,
a couple times, and then you realized, hey, I'm 70. I might as well do this noble research.
yeah, well,
It's
I
as
didn't
sketchy
even
as it
think
is.
of it as that.
Okay.
I didn't think of it that way. I just felt like if I could make a difference, I would love to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And I felt like it gave some students an opportunity to do something really significant.
Mhm.
And I approached several students, and they were really, really excited about it, but they were married, and their families said, no, 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 no. So they all stepped away.
Uh-huh.
And I ended up with 2 students from China
Mhm.
that did the work, both working on a PhD.
Mm.
So, and real pleased with their work, and really fortunate that we were able to get those students to work with me on this project.
Fantastic. I'd love to talk to them later at one point. Maybe you can put me in touch.
Well, one's actually a professor in China right now, and the other is actually working for the Department of Transportation in South Carolina.
South Carolina. Amazing. Cool. Yeah. So for those people who don't know, since this people will see this interview, hopefully, people who are interested, um, architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth are a group of architects and engineers.
By the way, your voice is cutting out.
Oh, my voice is cutting out. Okay.
Hey, Nathan, your voice cut out.
Okay.
Now it's back.
Now it's back. Okay. Thank you. Architects for
Yeah.
9/11 Truth, architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth are a group committed to the ongoing research and exposure of the truth that of the events, that the true nature of the events that occurred on 9/11. And if people don't remember, that was 2001, two airborne objects collided with WTC1 and 2, World Trade Centers 1, World Trade Center 2, and they collapsed. And what a lot of people don't know is that there was a third building that collapsed half a block away from WTC1 and 2, and that's WTC7, World Trade Center 7, which was not struck by a plane or anything other than some shrapnel from WTC1, and that hit the building. There was a fire, and the official story, I believe, was that the fire got so out of control in the building that it melted the steel beams and the building collapsed around 10 hours after the original buildings fell. So your research was financed by architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. I believe like 2,600 architects and engineers came together and funded this research and passed it on to you. And as you were saying, they invited you multiple times, but you said, no, I'm good. No, I'm good. Third time's the charm. You agreed to do the research. And that funding then went to your university and so on and so forth. And they greenlit you. And then you spent the next 4 years researching the
Correct. Yeah.
the collapse of WTC7. So you are the head professor, or the head of that team that conducted the reevaluation of the structural collapse of WTC7. So I just want to get into the really nitty gritty. Like, I'm not a structural engineer, I'm an artist, but I'm really interested. And since it's the 20-year anniversary just after, I wanted to just address it. I was 13 when I saw the footage on 9/11, and I was in high school, and they brought the TV in, and we were all looking at it, and of course we were all shook. But I can't lie, I had this kind of like, I was like, this doesn't fully check out for me, because there are just elements of it. Even as a 13-year-old, I was like, I feel like I don't see any insignia on these planes. It still just seems a little bit, I mean, I've always been skeptical of what I see on television anyways. That was just my experience. And I remember telling you in our first conversation that, I've been an activist all my life as well. So I would be at protests with my family, and I'm a musician. So my family was part of the activist street marching band. So if there was ever a protest, we would come out and we'd parade and we'd play music, and we'd, guide the protest as it moved through Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And I remember I was 11 years old, and there was this massive protest, the biggest protest I've ever been at. and there was like 30,000 people in the streets of Vancouver downtown, and it was a GMO rally, right? Just awareness around genetically modified organisms and that. And it was the biggest turnout I'd ever seen. And I was kind of surprised, right? And I was young, and I was just there doing my thing, playing my trumpet. And the next day, crickets in the media, you know, there was no reference to it in the media at all. So, you know, that gave me a little bit of you know, I just had this kind of, I always second guess things about the media for that reason, because the way things are laid out, you know, it's interesting. Anyways, enough about me.
Let me correct something you said.
Yeah, go on.
So the I don't know that there was any issue about the melting due to the temperature, due to the fires. There was an expansion that right. In other words, it enlarged, it lengthened. Okay, and we can get into those details, but I just want to make sure that, you know, it wasn't about the melting of it. It was about getting hot.
Getting hot. Okay, hot. Yeah. Okay, so I've got a bunch of questions, and I'll lay them on you. So we've kind of gotten into this, but why is it that your expertise was so coveted in this reevaluation? Your expertise is in bridges, as we read earlier, structural engineer bridges, but also in particular, temperature, extreme temperature. So why is it that your expertise was so coveted by the A&D for 9/11 Truth, and why is it that you were the man for the gig to reevaluate the structural?
Well, I don't know that I can answer that really well, but I can tell you this, that when I went back to do my PhD, I did not, I was actually working on a different kind of project at the University of Illinois, and they ran out of funds. So I went to Missouri, and they had funds for doing research on bridges. And I had been doing a lot of bridge design because I worked for a consultant while I was working on a PhD at the University of Illinois. So when I got there, it turned out that my research was on the environmental effects of bridges. And what that meant was, how did the weather influence the performance of these structures? And you really get to know what you're talking about. You're talking about snow, ice, water, you know, rain, temperature going up, temperature going down, not extremes necessarily, but extremes for that kind of environment. Mm-hmm. Basically snow, you know, winter conditions, summer conditions. And prior to that point, nobody ever really considered temperature very seriously in the design of these structures. And through my research, I began to realize that, oh my gosh, about 30% of the loading is coming from this environment. And if you really stop and think about it and put yourself into that world, you got to remember, you got to think that how long would a bridge last if it was indoors? It would last a lot longer than when you put it outside.
Yeah.
So this interaction that's going on is not simple. And so therefore, I begin to get very interested in how to look at thermal conductivity and the effects of temperature up and temperature down, and the sun's rays, and the conditions of, in other words, solar energy and radiant energy, and going out as well as coming in, and conductivity, and also wind blowing, convection currents. All these things are very, very complicated in the real world, and they're all changing all the time. Mm-hmm. It's not just, oh, we have constant wind today. No, nothing's constant about it. It's basically all over the place. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, to try to understand all of that provided a hugely wonderful tool for me, because structural engineers are not typically taught this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so in order to get myself up to speed to be able to do that kind of research, I had to do a lot of studying to become well versed in the mechanical engineering world, well versed in the climatic world, well versed in all of these different things, and putting together into a tool that I used that also for examining structural response and why they were having trouble for bridges. So this building was just another kind of one of those problems, except it wasn't all over the place. There was conditions occurring over a 1 day period of time.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? But not simple, but not simple. So the question is, in this building was, okay, so there was a collapse. And I told a 9/11 Truth when I took on the project, I said, I probably am not going to be able to tell you what happened, but I will tell you what didn't happen.
Hmm.
And so it didn't take me long to figure out that fire was not what happened.
Hmm.
So that was the first thing he came out, and it came out very quickly. I didn't waste a lot of time coming up with that answer.
And how did you figure that out?
Well, went back to the kind of research I was doing. I was taking, okay, we have fires here. We have situations that can create a problem. And so let's ask ourselves, if we take just a knife or a fork or a spoon, and we put it over a fire, and we're holding it in our hand, we begin to feel the heat, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden it becomes almost unbearable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's coming from the fire towards where you're holding it. Okay. So if I was to take that and clamp it so that it was clamped, and I'm no longer have it in my fingers, but I do know it gets hot, and I do know when it gets hot, it's going to get longer and wider. And in other words, it's going to move in every direction. It's going to expand. So how does it move? It moves from wherever it's fixed to the other end freely.
Mm.
There's no restraint, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I was to take it and clamp it on the other end, it would go the other way.
Yes.
So this begins to tell you, okay, all right, there's some place in this structure that if I heat it up, it's not going to be moving. It's going to be moving everywhere with respect to that.
Right.
And that we call a thermal point of zero movement, because that's the stiffest spot within it. And if everything else is free to move with respect to the geometry of how the structure is made. Are you with me here? You follow me?
I think I'm there, yeah.
Okay, so I'm trying to get it out to where everybody could kind of understand this idea,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that means that if it's going to expand, it's going to be expanding with respect to some point within that floor system, if you talk about a floor, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And where is that? That's the first thing I begin to look at. Where is that located? And also, the other fact of the matter is that if this building is going to fall down, we need to know where the centroid, the center of gravity of this thing is. So if you take your pen and you put it on your finger and you don't have it over the center of gravity, guess what it's going to do? No, put it horizontal.
Horizontal, okay.
And lay it on your finger. And if you don't have it over the center of gravity, it's going to tip.
Right.
So you got it pretty close to the center of gravity. You move it over a little bit, it's going to spin, it's going to go over, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the structure is no different.
So that's the centroid?
That's the centroid. That's where the center of gravity, the center of weight is going to be.
Right.
And if you got a building that's not rectangular, not exactly symmetrical, which this building was not.
Right. It was what shape was it? A
trapezoid.
Trapezoid, yeah.
So we got to find that point too, because if it's going to come down, it's probably going to try to come down through that centroid.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't, it's going to tip.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You follow where I'm going with this?
Yes.
So it kind of gives you a mental idea that, okay, there's a couple factors here that are relevant in playing a role. So then from there on, the question becomes, okay, where's the fire? How much of the fire is that? Why is it truly causing all these issues?
Yeah, like if there was a fire where my fingers are, and this is the rest of the building, it would just tip like that, right?
Well, not necessarily. Remember,
necessarily.
don't forget that we got centroid yet. We still got
Right, the centroid. So
all these issues that are going on that we got to pay attention to, right?
okay. Get ahead of myself.
That's okay. Anyway, I'm trying to get the message out to help people understand who's not in the engineering business. What really we have to think about here.
And pause. Sorry to just to interrupt 1 second. So the building fell into its own footprint for people who may have not have seen it or don't remember.
And
yeah, evidence of footage of that and everything.
Let me break this down a little bit for you. So when we did our study, we spent a lot of time looking at these issues I'm going through right now. That's all occurred at the very, very beginning. And I had 2 students, each one of them working on PhDs, each one of them working with a different computer program, each one of them looking at their problems each day, coming in, and we all 3 then would go through that and make sure that I had a quality control plan in place. So everything was based on science, not based on any perspective, not based on what other people wrote, but based upon the findings and true science moving from A to B. So we would be able to evaluate exactly how this thing was going to behave from one moment to the next. So I had them, for example, take the best knowledge we could get, which were erection drawings, and put that into an AutoCAD environment. AutoCAD being a drawing software that you can actually put 3-dimensionally, put the structure in place. We then took that, once we were sure that we had how the building was actually built and that every piece was in there as correct as we could find it, we then put that into our computer software. And we had 2 different programs that we were using, and we would check the solutions from whatever we were looking for on that day. We would check the solutions using both programs, 2 different people running them, to make sure that we got the same answers. And if we didn't, then we had to ask ourselves, okay, what's going on here? So that was a quality control plan in place for every day. If you take all of that now and you say, okay, the question is really, was it a fire? And that was a big question. Was the fire the reason for this collapse? And the reason we were looking at that is because Nist had come out and said that was the cause. Yet there was no record of any high-rise steel building that ever collapsed because of fire.
NIST is the National
Institute of Standards and Technology.
National Institute of Standards and Technology. All right.
So anyway, we began to look at what they did, and if we could come up with the same answers. We wanted to make sure that if that's true, and if they were correct, that we could do that. So we looked at they developed they had a fire model. We also developed a fire model because one of my PhD students was working on fire technology. And so we wanted to see if we agreed or disagreed. For the most part, I agreed that the fire models that they were using was accurate enough. And so we went ahead and used those as well. So then the question is okay, so you got the fire. Over what period of time, and where is it, and how come, and how does it behave? How does the structure respond to it? Those are the questions. And are you going to get the same answer as Nist did? That's what we did. Okay. So we went through all those studies, and all of a sudden we didn't get the same answer they got. So now the question is why? So we spent quite a bit of time over the next many months looking at why we got what we did and why they didn't, or why we didn't get what they got. I mean, so looking at it both ways, right?
But you
And
had the same information that they did, like the structural drawings and the information about the fire, which you
yeah,
agreed with.
although they basically had they looked at it as if the concrete slab and the steel framing didn't work together. They didn't believe that there were any shear connectors between the two. Shear connectors being the fact there's studs that's welded to the top of the flanges of the steel
Is that like,
beam.
is this a shear connector? Like
Well, just imagine, if you will, a bolt,
a bolt? Okay.
and the
Okay.
bolt is actually upside. The head is up. Head is acting is upward. The bolt is downward. No threads on it, and it's welded to that top flange, and you
Okay.
got those spaced.
Mhm.
Am I making sense?
I think
So
that's
along the length, there's like two of those. Let's just say every 12 inches or every some spacing, and that's embedded into a concrete slab. And if that's done, then the steel beam and the concrete are going to act together once that concrete is hard. Because the concrete's not going to slip with respect to that steel, because we have forced it to act with the concrete and the slab to act together, because we welded those studs on top, right?
Okay.
And they're called shear connectors,
shear connectors.
shear studs.
And
Yeah. So they said there weren't any there.
they left out the shear studs.
Yeah. And so we also looked at that too. We said, okay, we'll see, but I couldn't even get their answers even doing that. So they basically also then had assumed that the exterior of the building was stiff. They held it. In other words, they said it was really, really stiffening. So everything moved with the exterior. Sorry, it wasn't stiff. It was flexible. And it turns out the stiffest spot was near the elevators. Aha! Why am I bringing that up? Because that's the point of zero movement. That's the thermal point of zero movement. Guess what? So when you heat up the floor, guess where it's going to go? It's going to go away from that spot. And so our values came out not only smaller, but in a different direction. So column 79 was actually not experiencing as much movement as they thought it was, based on my study. Okay.
Was column 79 the one that was hit immediately by the fire?
Well, that's the one that said that that experienced the cause of the collapse.
Okay.
Right. And they left out some stiffeners, and they left out the fact that the member had since their movements were bigger than ours, then they changed the amount of movement at a later time. I mean, the width of their bearing plate at a later time. So there were several things like that. I don't know why all of that occurred, but it did, and that led them to the answers that they proposed to be the why it came down the way it did. So. But then if you really put all of that together, that was just one part of this study. I mean, we spent over a year just looking at, okay, now we know those things. Just how did this building come down? Why did it behave the way it did? And I tell you, that was not an easy thing to determine, because we spent almost 12 months just looking at that issue alone, trying to find out what had to happen. What had to occur? And I'm not talking about the cause. I'm talking about the conditions of the structure in itself. What had to be there in order for it to collapse the way it did? You know, and that's how I came up with the fact that the collapse of the building, well, it's a global collapse, but I was really getting at the little section at the top. I'm having a senior moment here, but
I go through my notes. Sorry, what is it?
Well, there was the section at the top that actually came down first.
Yes, the kind of booth at the top. There's like a
Yeah.
cabin at the top of the building that
Yeah, that came
fell,
down
and then
first.
that came down
And then,
first. Yeah.
and in order, we discovered instead of that collapsing down at a lower level as everybody thought it did, it actually was up near the 45th floor.
So the collapse started on the 45th floor, not on the 9th, as they
Right.
proposed.
And then with all that being said, you got to stop. Oh, there's no fire up there.
Right. Why would it fall? Right.
So why did that happen? I mean, so there's those kind of questions. Okay. And then we went to then we started looking at, okay, if it's starting to collapse, what has to happen to cause it come straight down? Because it did. This is not a rectangular building. It's a trapezoidal building. It's not going to come down straight down with the weight distribution the way it was, unless some systematic thing happened within the columns and the exterior and all that kind of stuff to make it work. So we spent literally months and months and months looking at those issues, those issues alone, to try to evaluate why and what's going on here. How come it's actually a global collapse?
Interesting.
I'm not going to go as to the possible reasons why something like that could happen, but I'm going to tell you that that's the only thing that I could determine for sure, that this building actually came down globally, not a piece failing here and then a piece failing over there and then a piece this progressively. That's not what happened. So inner core came out first. A few seconds later, about 1.3 seconds later, the exterior columns then followed that, based upon all of our studies. And those took a long time to. And then we also looked at 4-story buildings, 5-story buildings, other buildings, to try to see if we could really see an issue with respect to what we were finding. So that's kind of where we were. We spent a lot of time just evaluating different kinds of modeling to try to simulate what may have happened. So.
And your research was a 4-year period?
Yeah.
And
I could have used another couple years, actually.
Really? And Nist, they had what was their period of research?
Gee, I don't know. I think about 7 years.
7 years. Okay. All right. And they came to that conclusion. Interesting. Yeah, I wish you had 7 years as well. But I believe your research was done well.
Well, you got to remember too that AE 9/11 Truth, they funded the university at the tune of about $350,000.
Incredible.
And that was all donated by the membership of AE 9/11 Truth, who were engineers and architects.
Incredible.
Practicing engineers and architects for the most part. There might have been others as well, but I think almost all of them were licensed engineers and architects.
Yeah, they funded the research themselves through their own
out of pocket.
Yes. Incredible.
Yeah.
And it was there were enough skeptics or interested bodies out there to make this research happen.
Well, I think it's important to know the truth.
Yeah.
And there were so many people that were impacted. I'm not just saying people, families in this country. And we don't ever want to see something like that ever happen again. So if we don't understand what caused it, and I'm talking about caused the failure, and we don't have a good understanding of that as practicing structural engineers, we really need to rethink, because we don't ever want to see something like that happen again. So if that means there needs to be a code change, if that needs to be some form of provision to prevent it from ever happening again, that's where we ought to be.
Yeah.
That's the primary reason I took this on. I did not want to see ever our families. And I think I lost one of my former students in that thing, who was from China, by the way, who went to Florida and became a business major after he did his mechanical engineering degree, and went there and was working. I'm very sure, I've never heard from him since. And I knew he was working there. But so just breaks my heart to think about those kind of things, and how we should be able to, as a country, be able to prevent that kind of stuff from ever happening. And we have the tools. We have the tools to do it, to evaluate, make sure it never happens again. And of course, there's not been any others that failed like that, due to fire. So anyway,
truth.
so there's a lot of things that I looked at on this thing. Am I helping you with respect to?
For sure.
No.
Yeah.
Good.
Whatever you got, keep going. I can ask you more questions.
So you know what? Some people say, well, what about the fire being over here versus over there? We looked at all that. We looked at the fire. There's other questions. I mean, where are the combustibles? These floors were either security companies, like our security in the United States, or security in New York. There was also financial institutions at these floors. And what do they do with the papers? They probably put them in safes, right? Financial institutions, I would think so.
Right. So you're talking about the fire. Why would the fire?
I'm talking about the fire. Why? What keeps it going to 5 o'clock in the afternoon?
Right. When you just have a building hypothetically full of children.
Now, I didn't let that influence my thought much, but I certainly have still to this day wonder, how could you have a fire lasting that long? You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And causing so much damage.
Yes. Well, the 9th floor, I believe, was Secret Service, right?
I'm sorry?
The 9th floor of the building was Secret Service.
Yeah, I think so. I have
maybe they had some, combustibles, experimental combustibles in there.
I don't know.
No.
I can only tell you what I do know. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Which is why we all love you. And we really do appreciate it. So the Halsey Report, in my circles, we talk about the Halsey Report a lot because we call it that, then we have the Toronto Report here in Canada, which was also research into the events that took place. And, I won't get into that too much, but that report was pretty conclusive in what they thought was, I won't even say it, but because I want to stick to just, surgical facts, the world of surgical truth that you're so apt with. But we look at the Toronto Report and we look at the Halsey Report, your report, and it's interesting because it's a different narrative, or it appears differently in both of these reports. The official story says something contrary to the Halsey Report and the Toronto Report, vice versa. So your report and the Toronto Report came about after the official story was announced, and Nist's official story was announced. And for me, to get real closure on those events, I think we should look at the most recent data, right? That's just me. And I think that if we could get closure on those events, it could be, there's so much flexibility to truth, I think we should put it all together and really look at it. And since it was politicized so much immediately after, and is responsible for so many of the acts and measures afterwards, it's as if we're acting out of baseless.
Well, I kind of feel like that it would be a wonderful thing if all the politics was thrown away.
Yeah.
And we all, as scientists and engineers, sit around the table and we examine every little piece of everybody's report, and they look at, okay, what's going on here? What's going on there? Why is this? Why is that? And we come up with, as a team, a solution that everybody can agree to.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing?
That would be wonderful. Yes, that would be so wonderful. Yeah, but we're not quite there. But we have, but this is the thing, the information is out there, right? And not everyone's working
There's,
together. Not everyone's, that's the issue.
well,
Maybe
it's kind of
time issue.
it's kind of an amazing thing, isn't it?
It's
That
really,
people rather argue than try to figure out how to make, okay, what did you do? Why did you do this?
yeah,
How can I agree with you, and what can I need to do to prove that you're right and I'm wrong, or I'm not wrong and you're right?
yeah,
All those. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with it.
yeah. Why are we afraid of that?
That's letting the tool of science do its job.
Yeah, and it's so important. And this is interesting because science, right? You work in science, right? Am I?
I do.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I personally not in science. I'm in the creative arts, and I'm really intrigued by science. And I think that the theatrical, my experience with the theatrical is it's flexible, right? And we can talk around an issue, right? Say like I write a play about, I don't know, WTC7, but instead of WTC7, I'm talking about like Kool-Aid or something, right? So I'm gonna talk around that issue and call it something else. And in so doing, I will create this compelling narrative, right? It's a compelling narrative, and the audience will watch it and they're like, this is interesting. Like he's talking about something, I can't put my finger on what it is, but that's not useful in science, It's useful when you're entertaining people with art, but not in science. And I really think that it's so important to, separate those two things. And
Well, and even in science, it's not necessarily a bad thing for two different people that have done something to totally disagree,
mm, mm,
because that establishes somewhere there's got to be a solution that is
mhm,
right.
right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong by saying, okay, I don't agree with you and I don't agree with you, da, 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 da. And so let's figure out the real science. As an example, I refused when we started to allow my students to try to hear everything that was going on about the subject we were in. I said, I don't want you to be influenced. This is about science. And then when we're done, you can read about it all you want.
Until we're done, yeah, stay out of it.
Stay away from it.
Yeah.
Which was a different approach, because you see, you don't want to allow yourself to have the weakness of thinking you're thinking about science, but you're not. Because you can emotionally pick up something and think you're doing it right, but you really are not. And so it's really a very, very difficult thing to make sure that when you are thinking, that you're thinking purely scientifically.
Yeah, and you weren't taking outside influences. You were just
Right.
sticking to the work.
Yeah. And that's why I had the quality control every day. That's why I made sure that we all could be on the same page. If somebody thought one thing, we would come to an agreement or agree to disagree until a few days later we had it worked out, had a solution that we all could say yes, 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 yes.
Great. So I wanted to ask you, yeah, since there was no outside influence, it was just the actual science that you were working with. And you weren't looking at previous theories or any of that. You were just looking at the information, taking the structural drawings, putting it into AutoCAD and putting it into different simulations. So was your research peer reviewed by an outside source, or was it in-house?
There has been some peer review, and there's some going on now, and I intend to go ahead and publish it in a couple different journals. And I haven't got to that yet because I've been so over busy, but I will get to it here shortly. And those will probably be done within the next 6 months, and they will not probably be done in the United States.
Is there a reason for that?
I just feel like there's a lot of politics in the United States, and I'd like for them to be reviewed scientifically. So
yeah, great.
I think it's a better chance
Well, it's
there.
a big world. It's a good thing we have different nation states with different levels of bureaucracy.
Sure, sure.
You can cut around that by doing that. That's interesting. So I have a funny question. Oh yeah. In your final report, did you receive any criticism?
You know, we put this out to the public, and there was a few criticisms along the way, but not from engineers, not from scientific people. All the criticisms that were there, and they were all answered, were from people in the media.
Of course.
And so, and they, you know, they were arguing and arguing, and a lot of it was not in our country. Media in other countries, which I found interesting. But you know,
Controlled opposition.
and of course, some media in our country, of course, as well, but none from. I don't recall anybody in the scientific community that criticized it.
In the USA, or no one in the scientific community, period. Just media from different other places.
No, yeah, we did have people in the scientific community that peer reviewed it, and
Okay.
that was done.
Right.
And we did put it out there for anybody that wanted to participate and wanted to put in their points of view. We asked for it, and we wanted it to be something that people could accept. So that's where we went with this thing.
Great. I have a funny question. This is a funny question. I think it's a funny question. Socially, what changed in your life when your colleagues came to learn about what you were working on? Did the did you not get invited to conferences? Did the grant money dry up or anything like that?
Just the opposite.
Wow, you got, okay, amazing.
So I mean, the people in organizations came to me and said, "Would you come and present what you found? We're interested." None of that happened. I mean, none of the things that would turn you away. I would think that maybe there would be a probability that the university would have funding problems, but we didn't have that. I mean, so no, there was certainly complaints to the university, but they were not from anybody in the engineering world or the architecture world. It was, again, some media people that were trying to get the report not published. Interesting.
It's that narrative question that they present, the media presents. It's not the structural engineers. You guys need to get your own media, you know, the structural engineers. Get your own media, man.
Yeah.
I would love that. And I think that that's happening. And that's kind of what I'm doing with you right now. I'd like to, spread this information. I don't know if you remember, but the building itself, WTC7, the history of that building.
Well, I have a page in my presentation, and I think it was 1986 or something like that was built. And I go through the entire thing. I don't have it on my fingertips, but I could go look at it here in a flash and tell you. But it was built many years ago in accordance with the code at the time. I'm not overly thrilled with the design, but I'm not going to say it was I'm not going to say it was unsafe. It was not the best design in the world as far as I'm concerned, but that was just my opinion. Okay. So it was 47 stories. I think, geez, I can't remember the number of square feet per floor, but I think it was about 2,000 square feet, or no, probably more than that. Geez, hang on a second. Let me see.
Take it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting when those buildings were put up, and who was behind it.
So floor 9, you were saying 7, 9. It was U.S. Secret Service.
Right. Yeah, and that was where the fire.
Yeah.
Initiated?
Well, the 9 and below. There was
below.
8 through 10, pretty much.
Okay.
And then floor 13, where everything started, was a Provident Financial Management. That was that group. So anyway, to answer your question, hang on a second. Let me see if I can find it. Apologize for being off screen here, but
no problem.
let me.
I can still see you. It's good.
Wait just a minute. Okay, the construction started in 1983. The developer was Silverstein Properties. The construction was completed in 1987. In other words, it took 4 years. Height to the roof was 610 feet. There were 47 floors. Floor area per floor was 2 million square feet. 32 elevators. And the architect was Emery Roth and Sons, and the structural engineer was Aaron Cantor.
Mhm.
So that kind of gives you a snapshot.
Absolutely.
I had this ready in case I needed it.
Professional. Incredible. So WTC7 was northeast of WTC1.
Yep.
World Trade Center 7 was northeast of World Trade Center 1. And when it was struck by a plane, shrapnel hit Building 7 and damaged some columns and triggered the fires. That's the
Yeah, that was the southwest corner. Yeah.
Okay.
But it wasn't that significant. I mean, it did damage it some, but not enough to create. And we studied that carefully because there was a lot of people that thought that was the primary cause, but we couldn't establish that was the case. So.
Okay. Yeah. Random question. How hot would it have to get to make steel capsize? Because that's the official story, is that the steel capsized due to heat.
Hang on a second.
Sure.
So, not capsize, but the reality is that about let's see. So you're going to reduce the capacity with respect to the temperature. So at about 800 degrees C and higher, you're losing 30 some percent of the capability. So you're losing the capability to carry load at that point. Okay. So imagine that's at 800 degrees centigrade in that category. All right. But nobody to my knowledge has argued that that was the cause of the problem in this building. Their argument is that the building beams got too hot and they expanded and moved off their supports. That creates the problem. And so that was the argument.
But that argument
is the argument.
That's the argument Nist made, but that argument was made where they left
differently by me.
Yeah, differently by you, and they left out the bolts, so it would maybe
there was
easier for it to drift.
Yeah, there was also stiffeners. There was several things that was not done in accordance with the way it was built, and led them to a different answer.
Right. So they omitted a few things.
Yeah.
From the structural drawings.
And just to be fair to everybody, Nist is a wonderful organization. It's really a shame that the people there do a great job. I'm just disappointed that somewhere at the upper area, something happened to create where they went with this. I don't know how they got there. But the other thing to think about is that this system that we were looking at here, that floor system, the concrete, what people don't talk about much is the concrete is made out of cement, water, and aggregate. Aggregate being gravel or whatever, something like that. Okay. And every piece of rock has a different behavior and a different thermal conductivity. Yet the cement and water is pretty much constant. So if you take that material and you put it in water and it solidifies, you end up with a material that's different than steel. Not only structurally, materially, characteristically, but the thermal conductivity and the thermal coefficient of expansion, they're all different. So when you put those things together, you have a composite that is trying to move not just the steel trying to move, but you have, with the steel girders and the steel beams, you have a concrete slab over the top. And of course, Nist threw that away and said, oh, that's not really contributing to anything. But if you put the steel studs back in, the shear studs, then that composite is doing response. So it's responding to the heat, and it's going to respond differently. So we looked at all of that, and we also looked at what they did. We took away all the concrete, said, okay, do we get what they got? We also said, oh, okay, let's just say there's some frictional resistance between the concrete and the steel beams and the girders. We looked at that. So, I mean, we took all of those pieces and looked at them separately to try to evaluate the probability of what this thing could be. I determined that the concrete was probably made with a dolomite aggregate, which seemed to be the most common in that area. Don't know if that was true. Everybody that involved in this study was at a tremendous disadvantage. Let me tell you why. In reality, the very first thing that should have happened, that nobody was given the opportunity to do, that I'm aware of, is to go in there and look and take all of the debris and put it somewhere else and go through it and put this thing back together and find out what the heck what happened. It's what you do with an airplane. That's what you do to try to identify what particular issues may have occurred to get you where you are. But that was all hauled away.
Right.
So what we had to work with is not the ideal situation that you would ever do in a forensic environment. And I've done a lot of forensic studies, privately as well as scientifically. The fact of the matter is, you would never go there with that kind of approach if you had the option of getting everything you needed. I mean, you then could look at like chemically the material that you've got there after the fact and evaluate what its condition is. What kind of heat may it have gone through? Look at chemically, what has there been any change to it, to that product? Could it have occurred due to fire? Could it have occurred due to something else? There's so many things scientifically that should have been and could have been done had we had the debris available to us to explore it.
Right.
I don't have a clue why they got rid of it so quickly.
Right.
Hauled it away really fast.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, well, you did your best with what you had available.
Yeah.
All right. So you examined 3 things: the response of fire loads, scenarios that would cause collapse, and you also identified types of failures and locations that could have contributed to the observed collapse.
Yep.
Can we go through those, starting with fire load? We touched on this, but.
Well, the fire load was pretty much the same thing as the Nist. I mean, there were fires in different places within floors 12 and 13, and that's where we spent most of our time because that's where Nist was at, and they felt like that in those areas between floor 9 and floor 14 or 15 that most of that stuff was happening there. So, and we ended up doing fire modeling, and we came up with similar kinds of things. But even that, you can only do so much because you didn't have all the details of the fire situation, and it started early in the morning and it was still burning in the afternoon. So,
right, because building 1 was struck first.
Yeah.
And the shrapnel took off, hit
Right.
WTC7.
Yeah.
Around 10 a.m.
Or a little after, I think. Yeah. Some around that time. Yeah.
And then, so it was later in the afternoon. It was 5 o'clock or 5:20 when WTC7 went down.
Yeah, it was 5:20 in the afternoon. It came down. Yeah. And I don't know if this is true or not. I mean, I never paid attention to any of this, but after the fact, they said that the fire department had gone in and looked at it, and some were in the mid-afternoon decided that the fire wasn't significant enough to worry about, so they left.
Okay. Wow.
I don't know if that's true or not, but I did hear that after I finished the study, and if that's true, then that leads you to believe, okay, what the heck, something is going on here. So, right.
So that's one. That's
Okay.
fire load. Scenarios that would cause collapse. Can you lay those out?
Well, I can tell you this. This is all I'm going to tell you, is that those inner core columns over an 8-story level had probably between floor 17 and below would have had come out as a group.
Okay, they would have all just
the
gone
inner
up
core.
at
Yeah,
once.
and 1.3 seconds or so after that, the exterior would also have come out. That enabled it to then come down free fall.
That's okay, right.
And that's the only way we could get it to model almost precisely what you would see on the video.
Right.
So if you compared my failure mode to what you see on the video, it's incredibly close.
Okay.
And we looked at sequential test of failures, we statically as well as dynamically, to take out one column at a time to see how it behaved. Went around the whole system, looked at every aspect, couldn't get it to model without tipping.
So the only way was that the centroid or the elevator shaft? Or?
Well, yeah, pretty much, because then that inner core, see, was around that heavy part, which was near the elevator shaft, which was not that far away from the centroidal weight of that building. So
right. Global collapse. Okay. So you identified types of failures and locations that could have led to the type of collapse that occurred. Is that what we just talked about?
That's what I've just discussed. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, what else have I got?
I did look at seismic. I did look at wind load. I did look at a lot of other stuff. And, there's a lot of discussion about, okay, maybe the connections weren't working well and this and that and the other. But you got to remember, there was nobody in there.
Right. It was an empty building. Oh, yes. That was yeah, I was going to get to that. What do you call that? Dead mode or dead load? Or
that's dead load.
Dead load.
Dead weight.
Dead weight. So you have live load.
It's when they can move around. That's people.
That's people in your building.
Yeah. And you can have also live load from moving walls around, but that's not what we typically think of as live load. We think of people running around doing all kinds of crazy stuff.
But this building was entry doing crazy stuff. Just a really crazy dance party going on.
Yeah.
Contemporary dance movement. In short, I'll just ask you again. In short, what are your thoughts on what they established? What Nist established?
Oh, well, I think they made a big mistake. They should have. I think they should probably reevaluate what they came up with.
Mm-hmm.
And if they did, I'm pretty sure they would have to agree that what they came up with was not what happened.
Mm-hmm. And you're confident in that?
I'm confident.
Did Nist overestimate frame rigidity?
The exterior.
The exterior?
Yeah. I mean, it was not stiff like they said it was. It's not the stiffest part of the building. If it's going to be thermally expanding, it's not going to be expanding from there.
Right. So west to east, east to west, thermal movement was happening. So
yeah.
Break that down in layman's terms. Is it similar to imploding or exploding?
No, I think a different way to look at it is, imagine that you've got just a something that's flat and long, okay? And if I would take a torch to it and heat it up on one end, the other end would start getting longer.
Okay.
Because it's heating up.
Right. Yeah, so it's expanding.
So it's expanding, yet I'm holding it. I've got it locked at where I'm applying the fire.
Yeah.
Okay. So imagine that little flat piece out there on the free end is the exterior part of your building. What's going to happen? It's not holding it from moving unless it's really, really, really stiff.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could put a big lock on it, and then it's going to move where you're applying the heat because it's stiffer than where you're applying heat. So that's the big issue going on here. Where is the stop place? Where is it where it's the most stiff? And that's at those elevators.
Centroid.
Yeah. Well, no, not just the centroid. This is what's called the thermal point of zero movement. In other words, that's the stiffest area, right?
Not necessarily the centroid, but it was close to it. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my lord! So Nist made some invalid assumptions, asserting certain things that others also asserted. Invalid assumptions like that. It was a sequential collapse, is what they called it. So Nist claims the absence of girder shear studs caused the girder to not have sufficient lateral restraint, and that failure of girder to column connections were caused primarily by thermal expansion of large span lengths of the northeast floor beams. So they are incorrect in that.
Well, you got to remember that it's been proven since then that there were shear connectors.
Right. This.
And they based that on the fact there weren't any.
Right. So yeah, how could they? Right. That's why they came to that conclusion.
Yeah.
But there were. So,
well, there was two reasons why they came to that conclusion. That was one of them. The other reason was that they said the exterior part of the building was stiffer than the inner part.
Right. Yeah. Which.
So there was two issues there that's created where they went.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So given the information that they chose to, they cherry pick, maybe, I don't know. That's why
I'm not going to criticize how they got there. You know, it's just about, okay, that's what they said. That's what is not true. And so that led them to an answer that I disagree with.
Absolutely. So the official assessment of the building's collapse was mischaracterized.
Certainly was not fire. Certainly was not progressive. So would I say it's mischaracterized? I would say that.
You'd say it's not. It was not fire, and it was not a progressive collapse.
Right.
That's the official story, or the official, Nist's official story claims, but they're leaving out certain information. They're basing that off of.
Yeah.
So WCT7, World Trade Center 7, came down as a global collapse.
Yep. Yep. And if you looked at the video, it's pretty obvious.
Yes. Yes. In conclusion, so just to reiterate, in conclusion, by your assessment, you being one of the most, if not the most informed structural engineers on Earth, you say unequivocally it was a global collapse. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, it's been incredible talking to you, man.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
It's really been an honor, and have a beautiful day out there in Alaska.
And how's the weather where you are?
Oh my gosh, I'll show it to you really quickly.
Okay.
It's incredible. This is my view from my apartment.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this is beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia right now. And it's really pretty out.
And what's the temperature there, would you say?
It's cool. I'm wearing a sweater. It's cool, but really nice.
I see. Cool.
Just outside doing a little workout, and it was like totally nice.
Yeah.
So you should come down, man. You can visit anytime.
I need to do that. Yeah.
Me too.
Nathan, it's been a pleasure. So are you going to get back with me on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share it with you, and you give me the green light, and if you're satisfied, I'll put it out now.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate giving me the chance to share the story.
I think the world really appreciates it.
Thank you.
It's an honor. Thank you so much, Leroy Halsey.
You betcha. You have a great day.
You too, man. Bye.
Yep. Bye-bye.